Hi friends, I'm so excited to share how to paint the classic winter boot. Here are the materials you'll need. Let's swatch out some of the colors we'll be using today to create the boot. This is a great way to get used to your colors and to figure out which will work best for your painting. I'm using lots of browns and a green and a blue and Payne's gray for the dark inside the boot. We're using yellow ochre, raw sienna, sepia, burnt tiger's eye, raw umber, hooker's green, indigo, and Payne's gray. First, I start with a sketch and I try to draw as lightly as possible. You'll see I make mistakes and I try to fix them. Drawing for me is the hardest part of painting. Now it's time to get painting. We are starting with some raw sienna mixed with some water to create the base layer of the boot. I slowly darken the color as I go along. I try to paint areas that aren't touching each other to prevent bleeding. If you paint something that's wet next to another wet area, it will bleed into that area. I like to do a wet on wet technique, so you'll see I'm adding water to the paper and then I'm going to go in with some raw sienna. I love the look that it gives the paint. I love watching it. That is my favorite part of watercolor. And I'm adding some darker browns in here. Some raw umber, yellow ochre. And you'll need to know that the paint dries a little bit lighter, about 10%. Now we're doing the bottom part of the boot. And on this classic boot, this is a darker color. So I'm going in with some sepia and some burnt tiger's eye. The burnt tiger's eye is granulating and I love the look that it gives. It really gives a nice texture. As long as the area is still wet, you can drop more color in without blooming happening. So while I wait for that to dry, I'm going to add the shadow under where the boot is kind of open. Now I'm going to work on the layers of this base of the boot now that this area is drier. I'm adding more saturated color on top to give kind of a more dimension of the boot. While working, I'm always working in layers to try to give a more realistic illustration. While that dries, I'm going to do the base layer of the interior, and this is Hooker's green, and I'm mixing it with some blue, and I'm adding water. And I'm using a round brush for these. I usually use a 4 or a 6, but really use the biggest brush you feel comfortable with. So there's indigo and green, and I'm mixing it on the paper. The inside of this boot has, well, I'll go back to that after. Now I'm using some yellow ochre, which is a little bit more yellowy than the brown for the rubber sole of the boot. I'm going a bit darker and some browns added in to give a shadow. Now I'm going back up to the eyes and adding some yellow ochre on the eyes. The laces, doing some, I think that sepia mixed in with yellow ochre. And I'm adding a shadow on the edge. So I'm going with some sepia here to do the detailing on the top of the boot and add a shadow under the stitching. I have my other brush that I'm using to try to create the plaid texture. I just wanted to give kind of an abstract effect for this. I didn't want it to be too detailed because I want the boot to have the main focus. So you'll see that I'll do this and then I'll wet it a little bit and make it a little bit blurry. Now I'm doing the dark shadow on the middle, and I've put some Payne's Gray on the middle bit to add depth. Okay, the white detailing I'm doing with a jelly roll pen. This is once it's completely dry. I love that you can get that texture just with the white pen. I find I have more control than if I use gouache. And that's how I paint a winter boot. This boot has been turned into other products for my stationery line: a calendar, a notepad, stickers, a tea towel, and it was really so much fun creating it. I hope you enjoyed learning how to paint a winter boot. Follow me for more tutorials.